Good evening, Bulls fans. John and I are back. We took last week off. I actually can't remember John's reason for taking last week off, but I was tired of
Fantasy
shuffling out stuff.
championship game.
Oh, the
Come
NFC
on, man. I
Championship
was
game.
I was in mourning.
John, I'm a Bills and Buffalo Bulls fan. My football season ended like November 7th. I haven't. I guess I've been invited to a Super Bowl party next week, so I'll have to re-familiarize myself with what's going on. But for varying reasons, we took last week off from our Olympic Rundown podcast, which, after a very slow December of just wrestling and the occasional, actually December was just wrestling, we're starting to pick back up again. Both tennis teams are in action. I'm pretty sure we talked about men's tennis 2 weeks ago. We're going to go through tonight as if we have and not bring up those two matches again. Track and field is underway. We definitely talked about them at their opening weekend 2 weeks ago. They've done a lot of stuff since then. Swimming sneakily close to the end of their season. It's another full month until the MAC championships, really, but there's only one more weekend before they shy away from competition for that. Women's tennis is underway. Wrestling is still going, of course, and we have something to look forward to for wrestling this year because they're not under a postseason ban. With that, as always, I'm joined by John McWhinney,
Hey.
fellow Olympic sports guy on Bull Run.
Yeah, a little change of scenery. I'm actually back at school. This is my last semester at UB. I feel old.
Old. Hey, you've got a job locked up already, so
Yeah, well.
that should also make you feel old. Just so that I can feel better about the 17 months it took me to get a job from my last one. John, if not for the poster over your right shoulder, I really don't know if I'd be able to tell a difference between your UB podcast home and your Albany area, New York podcast home.
Yeah, I think the lighting's a little dimmer in here. Yeah, other than that, yeah.
In here,
Walls
your
are white.
television is right above your camera, so I can tell.
Yeah, so if I'm looking up, well, the TV's not on the NHL All-Star games off, so I don't have anything to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's
talk about actual
how about we
sports.
talk about UB stuff.
Go ahead.
I think we'll start for women's tennis. I don't think we talked about them. They
didn't exist 2 weeks ago.
I think we mentioned them. They were just getting ready to start when we talked about them.
As far as I'm concerned, they didn't exist. Their season hadn't started. But now it has.
They're undefeated.
They're undefeated. I don't know if we can say that they're 4-0. Given they're undefeated, and they're undefeated without much trouble at all, really. Two of their opponents so far this year were NCAA tournament qualifiers last season, and then they swept them both. We should use names and specifics and things. Last weekend, they had one match against St. Francis of Pennsylvania, a team that came up to Buffalo for a weekend against Niagara and UB and couldn't even field a full team. I don't know whether due to injuries or what. UB got a 7-0 win, helped in part by two forfeits in the singles match, and St. Francis couldn't even field a third doubles pairing. So UB they swept it anyway, but they won the doubles point. They were handed halfway to the doubles point from the beginning. But UB ran through them. I don't think anyone even dropped a set. So that's a 7-0 win. Then this weekend, they went to the UConn Invitational, which for whatever reason, UConn invited 4 teams and then ran it through in an abbreviated match format where instead of 3 playing one set to total 1 team point, they had only 1 doubles match, and that was 2 sets. And then instead of 6 singles matches totaling 16 points, they only played 4 singles matches. And why they bothered to do that, I don't know. The men play 3 matches in a weekend plenty of times. I'm pretty sure the women play 3 matches in a weekend at times. But I don't know if we can count them technically as dual wins. Even so, UB barely a speed bump this weekend. This team really had a pretty strong fall, certainly an equal to last year's strong fall, perhaps better. Their first match this week was against Quinnipiac, who moved up to the Metro Atlantic Conference and Agris Conference a couple of years ago and hasn't lost yet to conference opponents. They've gone to the NCAA tournament 2 times in a row. They were the unanimous preseason pick to win the conference again this year, and UB wiped the floor with them, won everything. I think they only dropped 1 set in the whole match. Then today they faced Bryant, who is the 2-time defending champion. Beat them 5-0. Actually had to go to 3 different third sets, so that makes it a little closer, but they won them all, which is good to see UB's team winning third sets. And then UConn actually managed to win a point against UB, but did fall 4-1. So 4 matches in, UB has won 5 of 5 possible doubles sets and 17 of 18 possible singles matches, which is that's a recipe for winning, I think. If you win, what would that be? That's like 94.5% of your possible points, John. You're the STEM guy.
Yeah, well, I use a calculator. Come on, I don't do all that. I haven't done math in my head in about 3 years. Come on now.
At any rate, if they win 17 of every 18 possible points the rest of the year, they'll win the national championship. So this is a good pace to be on. We support it. Really, UB is very quickly built a very deep roster. They only graduated 1 senior last year in Laura Fernandez. And they had 1 real blue chip recruit in Chantel Martinez Blanco coming out of Puerto Rico, who stepped into the top role this fall and really owned it, dominated. I think she was 8-2, 9-2 in the fall, having jumped Tanya Stoyanovska, who was the MAC Freshman of the Year last season, who herself had jumped Margarita Kotak, who I don't think was MAC Freshman of the Year, was a very impressive freshman herself 2 years ago. And so now UB's got ready-made a real deep top group of singles, 1, 2, 3 there. And I think Stoyanovska has played at first singles in the spring here, and Martinez Blanco has been at second. But in addition to Martinez Blanco, UB John has gotten a ton of productivity that have popped onto the website without much fanfare at all in Mercedes Losada Rubio and Sanjana Sudhir. And Sudhir this weekend was the only UB player to play a singles match in each of the 3 matches because they were abbreviated format. Coach Maines really had to move people around to make sure everyone got some action. But Sudhir went 3-0 this weekend. She looks like a real reliable spot at 5th or 6th singles. With the top 3 group, like Stoyanovska, Martinez Blanco, and Kotak, that's a couple points right there every match. You get depth like Sudhir. And then that's not even counting Diana Agasieva, senior transfer, came into UB last year. Not even counting Laura Holter-Bosch, a junior, another upperclassman. Not even counting the doubles pairings, which are largely static from last year. I think 2 of the doubles pairings are completely untouched, and so there's a lot of chemistry there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm excited. I know, like you mentioned, that they've largely been untested so far. They've really wiped the floor with everyone that they faced. But I mean, at this point, is it unreasonable to think that this team could make it to the MAC finals?
It's not unreasonable. The thing is that the MAC in women's tennis is a lot stronger in kind of a national barometer sense than the MAC in men's tennis. Last year, like the men, they kind of slinked in. They did slink into the last seed of the MAC tournament on a tiebreaker. Maybe it wasn't a tiebreaker because they played 1 fewer match because Andrew Cuomo wouldn't let them go to Indiana. But they made it into the last spot last year, kind of narrowly in the MAC tournament. They are a wildly stronger team than last year. In part, Laura Fernandez was very strong last year, kind of Agasieva has stepped in and been very strong there, in part because the addition of Martinez Blanco up top has moved Kotak down a level, down to third singles. And so even if Martinez Blanco does not do any better than Tanya Stoyanovska did last year, now they've got two of them, and Kotak is facing easier competition there. I think it's really important to note that the doubles pairings are mostly untouched. Laura Holterbosch had to find a new partner after Fernandez graduated, but otherwise it's people who got a lot of chemistry together in the fall, people that had chemistry from the past. I honestly haven't paid as much attention over the years, the last few years since I've been writing on Bull Run John, to the scope of MAC women's tennis, in part because UB hasn't necessarily been a contender, whereas on the men's side we can talk forever. It's also a smaller group on the men's side. But, I mean, Bryant and Quinnipiac aren't necessarily great teams. I think that the event would beat them pretty handily as well. But they are both multiple-time returning NCAA tournament teams. And, our basketball teams don't always beat reigning conference champions from lower conferences with smaller budgets. We'll see. I need to check out their schedule. I should have had that up. I don't really know what's kind of on the docket for who we can use as a real barometer in the fall schedule. This coming match this weekend against Duquesne. Duquesne beat UB 4-3 last year in a real tight battle. Then ASA College, which is where Agassiava transferred from. They are a very strong JUCO. They beat a lot of teams, a lot of D1 teams last year. I don't really know who is really real notable. Like, based on the last 2 years of the West Virginia invite, they should beat West Virginia in the middle of February. Pittsburgh, Youngstown State, Binghamton, I don't know. Minnesota, Iowa State, I don't know. I think before MAC play, the toughest opponent might be Navy in the middle of March. And then in MAC play, all bets are off in MAC play. Like I said, I haven't really followed it too much because UB hasn't really challenged them the last couple of years. I don't really remember who's good. I think they're good enough based on their improvement they've shown already this year to move up a couple spots in the MAC. I would be surprised if they got the bye to the semifinals that comes with the top 2 seed. The MAC on the women's side has 6 teams in the tournament, and the top 2 get a bye to the semifinals, and then you have a 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 situation. I think a pretty decent goal and very attainable is to get that 3rd or 4th seed, probably 4. But I'm saying that without knowing who the top 2 or 3 would be. I'm saying that just judging on their own improvement over the team that slunk into the 6th seed last year, amongst a crowded group from kind of 5 through 7, 5 through 8. I wish I could say more right now, but in part because the season's new, in part because I just haven't followed this particular sport MAC-wide much.
Alrighty. I don't have anything else for women's tennis, do you?
No. I just talked a lot. I kind of had that ticker in my head going, shut up, Matt. Calm down.
Alright, well, you talked a lot. I guess we can move on to wrestling. I'll talk.
Good.
I'll talk for a bit. So a few firsts. They had, since we last spoke, UB had 2 dual meets, both against nationally ranked opponents in Old Dominion and Ohio. Won one, lost one. It's the first time since the 2009-2010 season when they upset nationally ranked Nebraska that they've upset a nationally ranked opponent. It was also John Stutzman's first MAC dual meet win and the program's 8th dual meet win, most since the 2011-2012 season.
I think it's 10-11. I think it's 10-11.
10-11.
Keep talking. I'll look it up because I dug all that info up at the time.
It's one of those It's in that area
I know
somewhere.
that they haven't had double-digit wins since 2005, 2006. So if they can get 2 more.
Which could happen.
Could
We'll
happen. Yeah,
talk
that's
about
kind of the
that.
tone of voice I would take with it, too.
We'll talk about that a little later. First against Old Dominion, the match started at 157 pounds, which I think that ended up being a good thing, and it kind of swung the momentum in UB's favor. Tim Schafer came out. He won in sudden victory in overtime. Gave UB a quick 3-0 lead. And in my preview, I looked through, the Old Dominion lineup, and I kind of thought to myself that if UB got past Jake Gunning, they would only really need to win one match in the 125 to 149 area. Then at 165, Tyler Rowe got beat. Then at 174, Muhammad McBride won 5-4 over a guy named Brooks Clemens. And he actually transferred from Oklahoma to Old Dominion. He was initially recruited by Old Dominion in Oklahoma. He went to Oklahoma, which, if you're unfamiliar with wrestling, Oklahoma is consistently in the top 10 in the nation.
The Schultz brothers went to Oklahoma, right?
Oklahoma State.
Oh, damn. I thought I was going to make a nice movie plug on our podcast, but I guess not.
Yes, it's Foxcatcher. That.
Sorry to interrupt you. I haven't even watched the movie yet, so.
McBride beat Clemens. He had a very storied prep career. McBride came out and had a few really, really nice takedowns. Then at 184, Joe Ariola faced returning returning All-American Jack Decow, and he managed to keep it to just a decision, which I thought was a win in itself there. Then James Benjamin at 197 had one of the craziest matches, one of the longest matches I've seen in quite a while.
I was very frustrated by Benjamin's match. I'll let you talk. But.
It's frustrating, but having been in that position before, I can really respect his endurance and his conditioning.
I mean, his winning it kind of ends justify the means. But he had many opportunities. I should let John tell you that it went 6 overtimes. But he had plenty of opportunities, I thought, to go for a takedown in the dying seconds of a period and get the win, and he didn't really take them. But then his performance to ride out when it was do or die, last chance to ride out the guy in the final overtime was wonderful.
Yeah, and I thought it then, and even Coach Stutzman said in the post-game or post-match interview that that's where they won the match, was right there, was Benjamin winning that swung everything in UB's favor. And even the guys that they had in the call, I think it was Howard Simon and Eric Noodle and what's the other guy's name? Bob Kaczynski. That's his name. They kind of alluded to it there that Benjamin winning, that really gave UB a lot of momentum, because going into the 285-pound match, it was more or less an afterthought because everyone knew that Jake Gunning was going to win, which is really nice to go on and be like, yeah, this guy's going to win. And he did. He went out, dominated, got a major decision, and UB was up 13-6, heading back into the lower half.
Yeah.
Which really, the 125 to 149 that's Old Dominion's meat of their lineup.
And we should point out that we knew at the beginning of the meet that Old Dominion was kind of in trouble at 133. Their starter was injured in warm-ups, and they didn't have a backup 133 guy with them. And so we kind of knew from the beginning that either Brian Lantry was going to get a walkover, or he was going to get a backup 125 guy who was 10 pounds bigger than.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to set the scene out of 133, even with that 13-7 lead.
Exactly, and at that point, going back into those Final Four matches when we knew for sure that UB was getting the forfeit, which is huge at 6 points, and that's a 6-point swing for UB. They just needed to avoid major decisions. Then once Brandon Lappy, he was beaten by decision, that locked the matchup. It didn't matter what happened to Cole Cotton at 149. As far as significance goes, it's a pretty significant win. Kind of a turning point, really, and the culmination of everything that Coach Stutzman has done up to this point. Getting the right guys in the system, getting everything right in the classroom, and then getting them to buy into what he's saying, and this is that paying off. It's been a long time coming. It's the first MAC win since my freshman year.
Yeah.
Since EMU, my freshman year of college.
That's nice.
And it came against a nationally ranked opponent too. I mean, you can't really ask for much more.
I feel like this year you can't swing a stick in the MAC without hitting a nationally ranked opponent. And I mean, we've talked many times about how strong a wrestling program there are, but they must right now be at 5 with 1 or 2 receiving votes in like an 8 or 9 team conference.
I would say that actually all, because Ohio State, or excuse me, Ohio U, Northern Iowa, Missouri, Old Dominion, Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan are all legitimate nationally ranked teams. The only one that's kind of on the border is
us
in Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put us on the border of being nationally ranked right at the moment. Northern Illinois is still a little bit ahead of where we are. I've
asked you before, but it's like 60-ish teams in the country, college wrestling wise, right?
In Division I,
yeah.
I think there's more than that.
Okay. For some reason, I had in my head that it was similar to hockey, which is like 63 or 68.
I don't remember off the top of my head. But in terms of conference strength, the MAC is second only to the Big Ten, and the Big Ten
as the reigning national champions.
Yeah, has had the reigning national champions for the past, 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Since the last time Oklahoma State won.
Okay. Yeah.
And really, it's been Penn State and Ohio State.
And Ohio State is top 5 still this year. They're the reigning national champions. Iowa dodges Penn State and Ohio State in their regular season this year, and they're beating everyone by like 25, 30 points. Everyone. It's actually scary. Not at all relevant to what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of nice to be able to follow the sport more. So, big-time win against Old Dominion. Nice, great, hooray. A little bit of luck, both on James Benjamin and that injury. But, you make your own luck, you take advantage of it. Match against Ohio, more frustrating. I think maybe not as frustrating as the Kent State match earlier in the season where UB could have won by 25 points instead of losing by 25. But UB kind of couldn't, like Old Dominion, they couldn't capitalize on the chances they had.
Mm-hmm.
And then they couldn't necessarily keep it too close in those heavily underdog weights up at the top.
Yeah, several of the matches kind of fall under the category of too little, too late. I I mean, 125 is a good example. Kyle Akins getting a takedown late, but that only brought the match to 5-4. Then lost by virtue of the riding time point, made it to 6-4. Brandon Lappy lost 2-1 just by virtue of the riding time point because he couldn't get out early enough in the third period and couldn't get a takedown. He was in on a couple. Not Tim Schaefer, Muhammad McBride and Joe Ariel, the same thing. McBride actually had the first takedown in his match against Cody Walters, who is a top 15 guy in the nation. And he just wasn't able to really capitalize on that and use it.
Yeah.
And Ariel, the same thing, lost 2-1 against Andrew Romanchik.
Lantry had that cradle.
Lantry had Cameron Kelly cradled, and he was going for the kill shot, and he got recradled, got rolled over, and pinned. Which
that was.
It's tough to watch, but it happens. I mean, if you get yourself out of position for a split second, especially with those type of moves, you're really treading on thin ice. They're really boom or bust kind of moves where it's either you pin him or you get out of position only slightly, and then you end up on your back and you get pinned, and that's what happened.
Yeah.
But there were a few positives. Jake Gunning beat Jesse Webb, who earlier in the season was ranked as high as second in the MAC at 285 pounds. As of the January rankings, Webb was fourth, Gunning was third. So it's kind of a good matchup of two guys who are fairly similar in ranking and things like that. Actually, the guy who's in second, Gage Hutchison of EMU, Gunning beat him earlier in the season. Well, he's 1-1. He beat him in dual meet action and then lost to him at the Midlands Championships.
I forgot that they met there.
And then the first guy is Blaze Cabell Cable. He's from Northern Iowa. Yeah. He's a top 20 guy in the nation. So really, when you look at the MAC and the way things have shaken out so far with Gunning, he could make the MAC finals this year.
Yeah.
Depending on how the brackets shake out and where he's situated.
We're feeling pretty good about him qualifying for nationals, right?
Very good.
Especially in heavyweight where the MAC is strong. So there's going to be more spots available, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, I'll have to look at the prior years. Each
I remember
year,
asking you in preseason kind of what it takes, and I was thinking, top 2 or 3 guys in each weight class from the MAC make it, and you corrected me and said it's usually 4 to 6.
Depending on the weight class, yes. Top
still
2.
Got a lot of duels, a lot of exciting home duels before we get here, but it's just nice to be able to talk about the damn postseason after last year.
Top 2 guarantees you're in.
Okay.
Third place it's a pretty damn good bet that you're gonna be. So top 3, he's definitely a top 3.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, he controlled Webb. I don't remember what the margin of victory was.
It was 3-1.
3-1. It was not that close. I mean, and you were there in person. It was kept close that it was vulnerable if he made a mistake, but that's not Gunning's style is not to make mistakes. And it wasn't. I wouldn't necessarily say he was in control the whole time, but he was never threatened. I didn't think.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the guy who's ranked immediately behind him in the MAC rankings.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sitting third, and he's beaten. I thought he looked pretty when he wrestled him back in the EMU duel in, I guess that must have been November.
Yeah, it was right after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And so, I mean, he looks good. I don't even think it necessarily depends on the draw. As long as he avoids Northern Iowa. Is it single elimination brackets at the MAC tournament?
double
and champion.
elimination.
Double. Yeah, so then I think and I'm
He's
feeling
in
pretty good about that.
He's in good shape. He's in very good shape. And Colt Cotton did what Colt Cotton does.
Major Cotton?
Major Cotton lived up to his nickname. His guy from basically the start, he was bleeding like a stuck pig. I think they had to stop. They had to stop for blood time at least 5 or 6 times. Cotton, he has very heavy hands, and he's just smacking the guy around. He busted his nose open, and
well, he got bit afterwards.
And he also got bit, which
isn't really good.
Yeah.
Although I'll point out that I went into the rule book and tried to find anything saying you can't bite, and there's nothing in there. If you control F bite, all you get is all the times it appears in the word prohibited. But apparently it's not in there.
I think it's one of those things that's frowned upon if the ref catches you doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was kind of disappointing to see after the Old Dominion match to see it kind of fall apart a little bit against Ohio, but Ohio from top to bottom has a more talented roster than Old Dominion does in their lineup. Old Dominion, those 4 guys at 125 to 149, that's really all they got. And Jack Eckhout at 184.
And that's what you said, is UB's got to get the 5 wins from the unranked, and they'll be in good shape.
And they did.
And Ohio had more ranked guys and much stronger in the areas where they weren't. We've got to move on, unfortunately. This should come as no surprise, but we just talked about wrestling for 20 minutes.
No, not really. It doesn't surprise me at all at this point.
Something relatively quick. It could be longer, but I don't think it really needs to be. Swimming and diving, they take basically the entire month of December plus a couple weeks in both each directions in November and January off. And then January and early February is supposed to be their heavy, busy times in the run-up to the MAC Championships. Some heavy competition, and they'll take a few more weeks off in February for the MAC Championships. In the last 2 weeks since we've seen them last, the women have competed twice against MAC opponents, against Ohio and Toledo, and really absolutely destroyed them. And Ohio and Toledo are not particularly strong programs on the women's side, but they've won by 50+ points, which in a swim meet, a dual meet, that's pretty good. The men yesterday were at a quad meet hosted by Ohio State. Also had Michigan and West Virginia. Michigan, I think, is ranked 5th. Ohio State is ranked like 13. But the UB men did beat West Virginia once you pull all the scores out. It's kind of a lighter schedule for swimming and diving this year. All they've got left is next weekend. They'll travel to Olean for St. Bonaventure on Friday. That'll probably be a walkover of a meet. I doubt we'll even see anyone really push themselves. And then they'll go up against Cleveland State on Saturday, and that I think will probably be our best look yet. The women are winning. Both teams look much deeper than they did last year, which is very exciting. But at the same time, there haven't been too many new personal bests since the holidays. I've been tracking everyone's personal best all season, and a grand majority of them are from November 22nd, when UB was at Bucknell. And so don't really know what to make of that. We haven't seen too many NCAA B cuts this year, certainly not as many as last year. But they're winning. Every meet they go to, there's plenty of results. In particular, especially on the women's side, John, we're seeing a ton of freshman contributors, tons. If you'll remember last year, UB was very strong in the freestyle on the women's side. Very Lewis is doing a heck of a lot in multiple disciplines. On the freestyle, Carrie Giovanniello is doing quite a bit. I should be better than this, remember more than 2 names. I'm just going to sit here until the page loads and look stupid. Um, Mallory Buha has not broken the school record yet like I thought she would, but Maddie Jakumski in both the backstroke and the free has been very strong. And Catherine Schultheis has been a real strong addition to the sprinters up in the freestyle. And what this has done is it's making Megan Burns and Jess Powers even more potent in UB's lineup and where Coach Basher wants to use them. UB doesn't really have anyone yet who can match the versatility that they had with Spencer Rodriguez last year. But Brittany Walters hasn't competed in a lot, and she's a pretty good look for the IMs and kind of the longer races. It's hard to say because and how easy it's been for UB to rack up wins and high finishes in all their different events. On the men's side, same story with the freshman, in particular Mason Miller, who was just an absolute beast of a commit. He's stepped right in and been tremendous. But the men are also showing some stronger depth. They're much deeper in the freestyle than they were last year, and they've got two guys in pretty much every other stroke and discipline that can go. But it's hard for me, at least, John, to really piece together their chances. Last year I felt like I had a good read, that the women might not have the depth to compete for first, but they'd be very loud in the freestyle events and be a force at the MAC championships, and that the men might not have the depth across the board, but they were certainly strong enough to finish in the top half of the conference. And this year it's a lot harder for me to pin down kind of what they look like, because I don't know, I just can't tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I remember correctly too, last year I remember we would discuss in the back offices about we would talk. Actually, you were explaining to me swimming and diving and where everything was. I've kind of learned a lot in the last year or so. Just looking at the dual meet results, I would think that they would be able to make some noise. Obviously, I'm not as well read into this stuff as you are.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, last year the women in particular swam duels against Bowling Green and Miami and Eastern Michigan, and those are kind of the three schools on the women's side. And they lost by a pretty big margin to Eastern Michigan. They've dodged Akron for a couple of years. Just let me look up the results for completeness sake. The thing with the women, and this is why I'm excited about the freshmen, is they've kind of for a couple of years now graduated, never been able to pull in one team as championship caliber. Yeah, so last year, Akron was first, 100 points above second place Eastern Michigan, who were 50 points above Bowling Green, and then UB was, in the grand scheme of how many points are scored at a swimming meet, multi-day swimming meet, UB was relatively close to Bowling Green for fourth. This year they've swam against Ohio and Toledo, who were 6th and 7th, and really well far back of kind of the mid-tier of Bowling Green, Buffalo, and Miami. And so it's hard to say. Last year UB got beat by about these same scores that we're seeing. Let me start over. We're seeing this particular range of scores, UB against Ohio and Toledo, that you're saying give you hope. That's the same range that Eastern Michigan beat UB by last year. And Eastern Michigan didn't even win the MAC. They were well back of Akron. And kind of the range of scores last year reflects how much a 60-point win in swimming and diving means. And so it's hard to pick it out, but the depth is going to be so valuable. Both teams left tons of points on the board last year just by not earning points in every event. For comparison, the men did have more depth, but didn't necessarily have the top end winners. And they, once I scroll down here, I think they were third in the conference championships, but they were in contention for second late. Yeah, they were third in a very tight group just ahead of Southern Illinois and Miami. And Eastern Michigan and Missouri State came down to the final. the final event, or 2. And so the men look stronger. I don't know if they're strong enough to jump, to gain 250 points to get into the top echelon from last year, but they seem like a stronger team than last year. I think they're swimming faster than last year too. But it's just hard this year to figure that great. And on the flip side, the men just compete against 2 top 15 teams. It's tough to judge anything there as well.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. We've got one more weekend. I think the Cleveland State duel next Saturday will be really our best barometer yet, and it kind of needs to be because it's the last chance we get. Then we'll just wait and see what happens in the championships.
Okay, I think we can move on to track and field, which Matt, the sprinters are a lot deeper and a lot stronger than I initially anticipated going into the season.
Yeah, join the club.
I mean, on the men's and women's side, the school records in the 16-meter dash were both broken. Multiple times.
Darian Johnson has lowered it 3 times already this year. And go ahead. Sorry. I just wanted to sing Darian Johnson's praise. So.
Yeah, like as you said, Johnson's broken the record 3 times already. Malaya White has broken it on the women's side. Actually, just this week, Brian Crimmins, moving away from the sprinters, in the distance. On the distance side, Brian Crimmins broke the mile record.
Yep. And he now holds at least the 3 fastest miles in UB indoor history. At least. It could be more, depending on the way UB writes their record book. They only show the top result from an individual in 1 year. So, like, John Jones probably has 15 throws longer than Rob Dallenbeck's former shot put school record.
Mm-hmm.
But only 3 of them are represented because it's his best from 2013, 2014, and 2015. And so Crimmins is in that situation as well, where his first mile that broke the record, I've forgotten his name already, guy from 2006. I won't try to remember right now. But the fellow who formerly held the record, the first time Crimmins broke it, he broke it by like 0.2 of a second. And now he's got a couple more that are by another second and a half. So he's got at least the 3, probably 4 or 5 top fastest miles in history. Dan McKenna. I knew it was an Irish name. Dan McKenna. So yeah, I mean, last year UB broke a school record every week of the track season. Maybe they had 1 week off, but it was every week from beginning to end of the season. And this year it's the same thing. We've seen some sprinter numbers lowering. You've seen Crimmins break a record. Tyler Sheving is going to break his own 800-meter record, I'm sure. Remember the name Josh Galley. As we talk about the sprinters, UB this weekend did not break a school record, but put down the 2nd fastest 400 time in UB history. And the 400 record, I think, is the longest standing men's record on the men's side. It was set in 2001. And I think there's only one other record older than there's 2 records in 2001 and 2 in 2003. And then 1 in 1990. But Steve Esler's pentathlon record, the pentathlon isn't contested for men anymore. And the 55-meter dash in 1990 isn't contested anymore. So Josh Galley he's still a full second off, but he's got 2 of the 3 fastest 400s in UB history, and I think he's only a junior this year. And really, the thing that really impressed me with some of the sprinters is somebody like Ryan Billion in the short sprints and the short hurdles. Someone like Mike Morgan in the short hurdles. They haven't even these are upperclassmen. They haven't even seen the track yet. Josh Galley is a junior, and it's this depth, in any one event. We're seeing Trayvon Mask in the 400 maybe becoming 9th or 10th. We're seeing someone like Christian Doherty hit a couple in the hurdles. Anthony Clark is a freshman. Jermichael Bunch is a freshman. They're getting some sprint, depth in. On the women's side, same thing. We all know do we all know Chrissy Little? I don't know. I know that Chrissy Little is really good at the hurdles. I was expecting her to be good. But like senior Sabrina Bush has stepped up. Freshman Rashida Bowl is making noise kind of in hurdle events. There's just a lot of names, both underclassmen and upperclassmen, who are really all of a sudden making an impact, not necessarily at the very top of events, but in the areas where if you can add 2 or 3 points in every event in the MAC championship, this goes for swimming as well. If you can just get in there and add a couple of points, that goes a long way if you do it in a half dozen, 10, 12 different events. And the sprinters really, I've talked this long about sprinters. I haven't talked about Kamaria Long, who is, I believe, UB's indoor and outdoor 200-meter record holder on the women's side. We haven't even mentioned Kamaria Long. Yep, 2 fastest indoor 200s, 2 fastest outdoor 200s. And she's still around. She's running the 400s right now and doing that as well. It's really interesting because I was expecting the middle distance packs to be very strong. UB had on the women's side Meg Manley. Was it Meg Manley? I hope it was Meg Manley. Won the 800 both indoors and outdoors in the MAC championships last year. Obviously I've mentioned Crimmins and Sheving on the men's side. We haven't quite seen as many people put in those events. Not necessarily that the results have been disappointing, but there's just not as many people being put in those events. And I was expecting the distance to be stronger than we've seen so far, at least.
Mm-hmm. If you want to feel really slow, I just did some quick math. Darian Johnson 60-meter dash. The record time is 6.68 seconds, which is 8.98 meters per second. When you convert that to miles per hour, that means he was running at an average speed of 20 miles per hour.
That's still slower than gravity, though. Oh, gravity's an acceleration. Damn it. See, I'm not a STEM guy anymore. I used to be. 20 miles an hour. I can hit 20 miles an hour on my bike on flat ground for 70 minutes. But that's a bicycle.
Yeah, there you have mechanical advantage.
Yeah.
He's just using his legs.
His feet. Yeah. That's reasonably fast.
It makes me feel bad about myself.
The thing is, John, it's faster than 20 miles an hour. If you take out the first 10 meters for him to start and get up to speed, it's even.
That is true. As an average, his average.
I was not expecting that eye roll. Wow. I was just trying to be impressed by Darian Johnson, and I got, wow, I guess I'll stop being a know-it-all here. Yeah, kind of exciting. I mean, Kent State is going to dominate the sprinting again, as they have for the last couple of years, which is frustrating because they're Kent, and they're supposed to be good at baseball and nothing else. But this is the type of situation that gets UB. This is the type of way. This is the way that you get points and move up in the MAC standings at the championships. Another group really exciting us this year with a lot of depth is the jumpers in the field events. Obviously, when it comes to field events, we've always been excited about the shot put. On the men's side, Ryan Cribben and Devin Patterson have gone 1-2 in 2 meets and went 2-3 in this weekend's meet among collegiate competition, carrying the shot put banner. I pretty much expect them to go 1-2 or 1-3 in the indoor MAC championships at least this year. But on the jump side, we knew that Austin Ashby and Austin Price were strong for the men on the long jump, but Kayshawn Cathley has taken huge strides in the triple jump. In the high jump, we graduated Chris Reap, and again, we haven't seen Mike Morgan yet. But Laurent Durr is up above 2 meters. That's an improvement from last year. True freshman Hassani Rathan, reigning New York State high school champion, jumps 2.06 meters this year, which doesn't quite crack the top 5 all time at UB, but he's a freshman in like his first month of competition. So the fact that I even bring that up is significant. In all these events, they've got multiple guys, multiple guys who can earn points in really any meet. Ashby and Price in the long jump, Kathy in the triple jump, Durr and Rathan in the high jump. Jermichael Bunch is doing some jumping as well. Theoretically on him. And on the women's side, it's the same situation. All of UB's strong sprinters are strong jumpers. Tyra Forbes has won a long jump or 2 already this year. She's only she's a junior. I thought she was a sophomore. Freshman Crystal Henderson has impressed me. I haven't seen anyone on the women's side in the high jump yet, which is frustrating. But what can you do? I don't control these things. The men's jumpers in particular, John, another group that can rack up a lot of points for UB quickly at the MAC championships. And those school records are actually pretty good because Chris Reap and Mike Morgan set a lot of them lately. And then Ryan Billion, also, I don't know if he's done a long jump yet, but he's a former All-American in the long jump. There's a lot of depth there. So that's somewhere else just to keep an eye on, I suppose.
And I don't know if you mentioned it yet, but there was a John Jones sighting.
There was a John Jones sighting, but I didn't pay for flow tracks. So I don't know. When we talk John Jones, he's sticking around to train with Coach Garnham, which is the way to go because Coach Garnham is the best. So he's advancing his professional career, and of course he's got to compete. So while he's helping coach UB and training himself, he enters in competitions too. And
he enters unattached, correct, to these?
Yes, yeah, as any pro would do. If he had a contract with Nike, he would enter, and he'd be technically on Team Nike or whatever. I laughed at this in disbelief when it happened in the college competitions, and I laugh at it now. But John Jones beat the field this weekend at Penn State. In elite, Penn State invited, like Stanford was there, Texas was there, like real strong programs were there. And John Jones beat the field by 1.7 meters in an indoor shot put, which is pretty good. His throw of 20.82, close to half a meter. It was only 10 centimeters off of his outdoor PR. You'll remember that he's coming off of kind of a knee injury and a long rehab. He won a national championship last year without ever, lifting any weights through the season and on a very diminished workload. And now he's hopefully got his tendonitis fixed up and is ready to really start going. And in his first meet back, at least first meet that I know of, he blew past his old PR. It probably helps that he doesn't need to work on school anymore. But we're going to keep talking John Jones because he's got a really awesome chance of representing UB in the Olympics in 7 months, which feels weird to say, but it's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm. And do you know about when they'll make those announcements as to who's going and?
Well, I assume that he'll be invited to the Olympic trials. A small issue is that Ryan Krauser at Texas is probably healthy now. So in addition to the pro guys, there's him and Beryl Hill, who John beat out a couple times from Penn State last year, is also still around and young. The Olympic trials are July 1st through 10th. In Eugene, Oregon, because where else would they be?
Of course.
And the men's shot put will be the first day, Friday, July 1st, 5:40 p.m. I assume that's Pacific time. So that is 5 months and just under 22 hours away. And right. We'll see. I don't actually know, and I'm not going to look it up right now, where he needs to finish. But if he really is going to be adding a ton of time from last year's throws now that he's healthy. I mean, he was one flight away last year from representing the U.S. at the World Championships. You know, with everybody having one throw left, he was in position to advance to the World Championships, and he got passed. But he's one of the top 6 throwers in the U.S. right now, no doubt. It's a question of, is he one of the top 3? And it depends on how much he heals, has healed, and where he goes. But Garnham knows what he's doing, and so it'll be exciting to follow him.
Okay. So I think we can start wrapping up with our final team.
For taking last week off, I was expecting this to be a little bit longer, but it hasn't been the worst. Men's tennis. This is how you defend the title, right, John?
Yeah. I actually watched the Australian Open, and I have a newfound appreciation for tennis and just the endurance that goes into a tennis match, both for men's and women's tennis. Really, they lost. Since we last spoke, they lost in a real squeaker to nationally ranked Cornell. And since then, they've been on an absolute tear.
Yeah, to say the least. You know, they could have beat Cornell, and it would have been a big surprise, but the way it played out, they could have beat Cornell. Last time we were here, we talked about UB. They split a weekend. They lost to nationally ranked Dartmouth, and they beat Bryant without too much issue. Following weekend, they had something very similar. 2 Ivy League opponents instead of 1, but nationally ranked Cornell, kind of in the same tier as Dartmouth. And then Brown, who last year UB was 0-6 against the Ivy League, in part because Damien David, which I've learned might not, his last name David, which makes me feel silly. But he was from Montreal, Canada, so I thought I was pronouncing it correctly, and it might just be Damien David. So apologies for the last 2 years if I had that wrong. Anyway, UB was 0-6 against the Ivy League last year, in part because Damien, I know how to pronounce Damien, I'm pretty confident in that one, was injured at times last year, and UB really struggled at the top of their lineup. Right now, they are 2-2 against the Ivy League because they beat Brown and Yale. Yale just came this weekend, both by 4-3 scores, which is narrow, but it's nice anyway. This Cornell match, UB lost the doubles point. They had won one doubles match, and at separate times, they had 2-game advantage at first and second doubles, or a 1-game advantage, but at second doubles, they were up 5-4, having broken a serve to go up 5-4, and they were serving for the win. Oh, they lost the other one. Well, anyway, they were serving for the win to make number 1 doubles the rubber match. And at 5-4, they gave up 3 straight. They were broken twice and lost 7-5. Similarly, in first doubles, UB was up 3-2. I think they broke the other team to go up 4-2. And they fell back down and were down 5-4, got a break to get it back to 5-5 and save their bacon. And they had it to 6-6 and were threatening to win, and it was suspended when second doubles lost. And if second doubles had pulled it out, first doubles would have gone to a tiebreaker. And if UB wins that 1 point and the singles goes the same way, then UB upsets number 47 Cornell, excuse me. And it was there, you know, there's nothing to blame there. But I just said all those words, and really what it boiled down to was 2 coin flips. You know, second doubles had a chance to close it out. First doubles had a chance to close it out a little earlier and didn't. But when I say a break, I talk about breaks a lot, especially on Twitter when I'm trying to summarize. Game to game, which is when I say 6-4, that's 6 games to 4 games. Game to game, one side is serving for the whole game. And that's the white team in chess going first. And so it is traditionally kind of like in the MAC in basketball. hold serve, here we go, at home and steal some wins on the road, you're expected to hold serve. When you're serving, you're expected to win that game. And it's called a break. When you break the other side serve when they're serving, you win that game. And what that effectively gives you is a 2-game advantage, because by the time you win your own serve, you break their serve, and now you're serving instead of tied with a 2-game advantage. So if a normal distribution would get you to 3-3, but you break one of those serves and still hold, then after 6 games you're up 4-2, and that's a pretty commanding lead. And so in both of those doubles matches against Cornell there that I talked about, I think each of those matches had 3 or 4 broken serves, which is just that makes for a very lots of flip-flopping, and it was there for the taking, on both sides. UB, both of them fought back in it after falling down. Both of them had a lead and gave it away prior to that. And, it is what it is. And then they went in singles, and this is really what's exciting about men's tennis this year, is the top from last year's lineup. And last year's lineup did have it. They just never put it together until literally the last possible second. But Amar Homich, who transferred in last year, has jumped up to first singles, is very strong up there. Pablo Alvarez, who was looking to be the first singles guy after last year, it has been 6-1 at second singles. And freshman Ethan Natolo has had slightly less success, but he's been certainly a very strong third singles for UB. And they're getting points from the top of the order that they didn't get last year. And on a day like today, where they were wrapping up their weekend in Connecticut, that they were getting last year from the bottom of the order, Sergio won at 4 singles, and new guy Artur Kulikovsky won at 6 singles. And that's really the best of both worlds. Last year, UB would survive the doubles point, would survive kind of struggles at 1 and 2 singles, and would get enough from the bottom of the order to pull out a win. And this year, they're stronger in doubles. They're getting better results. Even if I'm not entirely convinced they're stronger at the top of the order than they were last year, they're getting better results. And when they've needed it, the bottom of the order has gotten results too. And they're, in addition to Boston College today, they beat Yale. Yale, first time ever UB's beaten Yale. So that's really exciting. And Monmouth yesterday. I didn't really do a good job of previewing Monmouth. And it's a 4-game winning streak and a 5-2 record overall, with the only 2 losses coming nationally ranked teams, both from the Ivy League, which is kind of where all the power is in the Northeast. Next week, they've got NJIT and a game against ranked in the Ivy League match, I should say, against Princeton. Princeton's the best opponent on the schedule. They're ranked in the low 20s, whereas Cornell and Dartmouth were in the 40s. And then they're home for a disproportionate amount of the schedule to bring the season home. And we can talk about that later. I've kind of moved on to the end of the story, John, without involving you. What do you want to say about men's tennis?
I don't know exactly what the significance of... I'm not entirely sure how the Ivy League... I know the Ivy League is by far one of the better tennis conferences. But how... Well, I guess I have a question for you. Is that how are the teams kind of tiered? Like, so we know that Princeton, Dartmouth, Cornell, they're all nationally ranked up here. Like, how far below them are Yale and Brown, and what? Obviously, just beating Ivy League teams is significant in itself. But I just want to know the significance relative to the other Ivy League teams.
Yeah, the Ivy League may not be one of the best conferences, but you've kind of got to think of it. One, tennis is a lot like softball and baseball. Places where there's more sun, people are better. The Big 12, the ACC, the SEC are really the big ones, and there are some very strong programs for the Pac-12. I like to think of tennis a little bit more like I do cross country and to an extent track and field, where you look at it from a regional perspective, because for the most part, UB is not at a level yet where they compete outside of their region. In the fall season, when it's more tournaments and individual based, The furthest we've ever gotten on the men's side is the top 16 of that individual tournament, which happened last year with Pablo Alvarez, and maybe somebody got there this year. I don't remember. On the women's side, I don't think we've ever even made the top 16. So much like cross country, teams throughout the season, the different invitationals we run at, and don't really see the MAC because they're in a different region. Same thing going on here. We don't see any ranked teams unless we saw Ohio State in the NCAA tournament last year. We could go in that direction and schedule Ohio State. But really, the only ranked teams in our region is the Ivy League. So for the time being, that's what we have to go on. Princeton. Actually, I don't know if these rankings that I'm looking at are updated, but just for clarity's sake, the rankings go to 75. And so Cornell was 47, Dartmouth was 42. Princeton is a bit higher than them. Columbia is at 15, and Harvard should be up there. Where are they? Harvard's right around Princeton, or at least was to start the season. But the rankings go all the way to 75, and so Yale not being ranked, Brown not being ranked means that they're at least as far as the rankings, as far behind Cornell and Dartmouth as Cornell and Dartmouth are from kind of the top 10 at least. And so there's a lot to go there. But I don't like to think of tennis as a national scale because we're just not close to that level. Like we might be in basketball. Before your time, John, we 2 years running brought in the number 2 team in the country to Alumni Arena in basketball and played them to the last possession. In basketball, we might be, I shouldn't have even been so patronizing. Last year, we led 2 top 5 teams in the country into the second half. You know that. It's a little different in tennis. And that's not necessarily to put down UB. It's just a reflection of how much more stratified it is. And so I don't generally think too much outside of the region. In the region, the Ivy League is the top dogs, and really any of the Ivy League programs So that's great for men's tennis. They have a less grueling schedule this year. Last year, Coach Nails set up a really tough March schedule, and then Damien got hurt, and it kind of killed our momentum going into MAC play. This year as well, MAC plays a bit expanded. In the past, it's been a true round robin. This year, everybody plays 2 of the rest of the MAC twice. Unfortunately for UB is probably actually they are one of the upper half of the MAC, alongside Western Michigan and Binghamton. You can guess which 2 teams UB draws twice in the MAC schedule. Western Michigan and Binghamton. And Binghamton shouldn't even be in our damn conference, but whatever.
Although all 4 are at home.
Yeah, all 4 of those matches are at home, which is nice. And home. On top of that, UB's last 2 matches in out-of-conference schedule are at home. So after next weekend, UB is at home for 7 of their final 9 matches, which between that and between not facing a grueling March, they'll be in a lot better situation heading into the postseason this year. And I think if you were to match it all up 1-1, Western Michigan you'd have to give Western Michigan the advantage over UB. I don't think you can say the same for Binghamton. Binghamton was picked 3rd, UB picked 2nd in the preseason poll. They don't scare me as much as they did last year. I think UB is not quite the same top to bottom team that they were last year, but they're getting results from the top of the order, which they did not. Last year they escaped into the MAC tournament. They got a senior day win over Ball State that proved to be a tiebreaker when both them and Ball State lost on the last. That lost to their destiny was in someone else's hands, and they only got it because they got in a senior day win. I think individually they were a better team last year, but this year they're getting results. And it's Coach Nickel has made it to the MAC championship with more piecemeal teams than this, and so all bets are off once UB gets into the top 4 of the MAC. All bets are off, and with this type of schedule, I think it's very, very favorable this year. I'm not as confident as I was last year, but last year I was very confident, and it totally blew up in my face until the very last weekend when I was right. But it's a very strong start, and against good competition, to bring it back to the here and now, UB was 0-6 against the Ivies last year, and so far they're 2-2, and they get one more chance. It'd be a real tough one against Princeton, but they get one more chance against an Ivy League program.
All right, so I think that about wraps it up.
I left the schedule for the next week, this week in Bowl, John. I mentioned NJIT and Princeton. For men's tennis, they'll be in New Jersey.
And I mentioned that wrestling will be at least I think I did that they mentioned they'll be at Central Michigan, their final away match, this upcoming Sunday.
Super Bowl Sunday. Women's tennis is home against Duquesne. We mentioned that. Women's tennis is home against Duquesne. Swimming and diving has a silly meet against St. Bonaventure Friday, and then they're hosting Cleveland State on Saturday. Which, John, you haven't been to a swimming meet yet, right, in your career?
No.
Saturday's your last chance. You should go. That one will actually be pretty exciting because Cleveland State's not bad. Track and field. Is going to Akron. Great. My least favorite place. Track and field's going to Akron. That's a 2-day invitational. I'll be interested to see what other teams are there. And we are still a week away from previewing softball, and I think 2 weeks away from previewing baseball, yes. By the end of the month, John, we'll have everything going. Everything except the fall sports, which, hooray, means more 75-minute shows instead of 1-hour shows.
Yeah, by the time the fall sports come around, I'm going to be a regular adult and working full-time. Good Lord.
It's not the worst thing in the world. Actually, well,
yeah.
No, it's not the worst thing in the world.
I won't be a poor college student anymore, so that would be nice.
Yeah, you'll be a poor adult, non-student. But you'll be in Western New York, which means we will maintain our on-the-ground Bull Run coverage.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, I'll be within, hopefully, a few minutes drive of UB. Still trying to find a place to live, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of there. It's going to be
it is here.
It's here. We've lost our final viewer. Oh. Well, thank you for indulging us on our 75-minute return show after the blizzard in playoff football last week. Next week, as you just heard us run down, we'll be talking all these same teams nobody knew will have started. Really, next week's more run-up to the MAC championships and everyone's respective sports. Swimming and diving in particular, it's the last chance we'll get to see them before a couple weeks off. Men's tennis and women's tennis will hopefully give us more highlights to talk about. Wrestling will hopefully give us some hope. And track and field, another week, another record. I expect it to marry along. You've been awful quiet this year so far. I want to see something. I don't actually need to, but it would make me super happy. With that, I'm Matt Gritzmacher from UB Bull Run. I'm joined by John McWhinney. It's Sunday night. This was the Olympic Sports Rundown where we talk all UB athletics. That is not basketball or football. Try to do this every week. We've been slightly less successful through the winter, but it's going to get too busy for us to have a choice. Everything's picking up. It's been good to have you. We'll see you next week.